Joining the Esports Dispatch today is a regular at this point. It's my good friend and CWO commentator / analyst, Mr. Chance. How has your recovery been post CWO Fort Worth, buddy?
I didn't get sick, so I have no complaints, no issues. I've been feeling good, man. How are you?
Pretty good. Obviously, I was going to say, there's a lot of people who go to these events and don't realize, the post-event sickness is actually a real thing. That happens all the time. I think I can count on my hand, how many times I went to an event and did not feel sick afterwards. So I'm glad to hear that you're recovering well, because we have a lot of stuff to talk about today. I will say, first things first, I saw quite a few people talking in regards to the crowd actually at CWO Fort Worth was insane. Talk to me about how it compares to the other crowds you've seen. Is it one of the best possible that you've kind of been a part of?
I think for open events that aren't champs, yes. I think it had to have been the best, by far. I know the crowds at the start of IW, the Atlanta and Dallas, were really, really good for cheering for teams that weren't Optic. But then the crowd size wasn't great because the venues weren't huge. But it was still good. And I think this one had it all. One of the biggest crowd sizes. It might have competed with champs even.
Wow.
It was pretty sizable. I mean, at one point we were filling the entire venue, all the seats, plus people watching over where the Bravo, Charlie, and Delta stations were to watch the Alpha match with seats filled and people all the way back. It was as full as could possibly be, it seemed like. So it was pretty good.
Well, that's great to hear. That's definitely solid to hear. And I know sometimes when people are watching on stream, they just can't really fully get an idea as how the crowd was. But it's great to hear, especially with teams like we talk about, kind of being more centralized in the kind of Dallas, Fort Worth area. We talk about obviously Envy and Optic, kind of where their main HQs are to an extent. But I want to kind of shift our focus a little bit now to some crazy moments that occurred, obviously because there were a ton in regards to Fort Worth. But let's go ahead and start at group play. First off, we see Heretics, 100 Thieves, Optic Gaming, E United all in the losers bracket to kick things off. What was your interpretation of overall of solely just the beginning stage? I see you laughing right now. What was your interpretation of that when you saw all those names starting off in the losers bracket round one?
It was all over the place. If you had told me before that Heretics got in losers, I would have been mildly surprised.
Yeah.
But then when you put them with the other names, it's Heretics isn't even on my radar after that point. I hear Optic and losers. That completely blows my mind. That was easily probably the worst prediction I've ever had in an event, or the most wrong I've ever been, because I expected them to win the whole thing. And if not, I still thought they were going to be pretty close to dominant and maybe one team would catch them. Didn't expect to go to losers. Didn't expect them to get knocked out. And I think 100 Thieves is another one. I could see this team making it to grand finals. I think they'll place at least top 4. And granted, for them, they still have the 2-1 record of where it's just unfortunate that they ended up in losers bracket. But
right.
I think right out of the gate, once we saw what some of the first round losers matchups were going to be, all the casters were just mind blown, completely taken aback by it.
Yeah. Now, one of the most interesting placements from the entire tournament was obviously E United finishing off in dead last, a top 16 placement from second at Vegas to second in their division, now last at Fort Worth. I mean, from what you saw, was it maybe a matter more of internal problems, regardless of what maybe people want to say? Maybe was that kind of something that got to them a little bit, or do you think it might have been something else?
From what I personally saw, I didn't. I casted the tournament, and then you know how when you cast matches and there's 3 other going at the same time, and so you just miss a ton of stuff? They got eliminated before I ever got to watch them. So from what I saw, I just did it. As far as I'm concerned, they just weren't at the tournament. But
yeah,
I think the only viable explanation has to be the internal issues of who knows if what the COD burner said is correct, but we know from at least the United guys' Twitter, they were thinking about making a change. They wanted something to happen, and Clay was in some regards around the center of it. And then the team exploded, and now they are making a change. So it had to have been internal stuff, because from what I understand, all the their hardpoint record 1-5, across the board, just horrible gameplay, and you don't go from first in division. Even if teams catch you off guard, you don't end up just completely losing out and looking like a terrible team. It had to have been internal stuff there. Nothing else makes sense.
Now, another shocking change that we saw actually came from Optic Gaming, obviously kind of defending champions when we talk about the first event of the year, a team that I have to reference. I know you deem them as probably better after the roster change, or rather not the roster change, but kind of coming into having Dashy back on the lineup. I know you were kind of one person who was saying you think that they could be even scarier. And I have to say, I was right there with you. I was thinking pretty much kind of along the same lines. I thought there might be an ability for them to have a little bit of a shaky period, but by no means a top 12 placement. It definitely shocked everyone, including us more specifically. I personally think it was more of Dashy's kind of missed presence, obviously, and the team's lack of time together heading up to the event. Is that something you agree with, or do you think there is possibly anything else that maybe even kind of more in depth along those lines, or do you think there could be something totally different that kind of messed with OG?
I mean, I know something TP was talking about was specifically saying of like when we had to put in all that time with Zuma, not only do you miss X amount of like LAN experience weeks of practice, but then you just get set behind in like your practice. And I think he made like a little video about it. And he specifically was talking about like, we knew that we were going to have issues and we didn't do anything to mitigate that going into the event. Like they had to put X amount of time into search and destroy, and they just didn't get that done. And I think even at the LAN they had, like they were doing well, but not well enough by their standards that they could be confident that they were going to win. And I think he was talking about motivation issues because maybe they won the first and got a little bit complacent, or who knows. So you have all that going in. And then as the second part, maybe they just had a slow start. Like you get third in your vision, you lose 2 series to Reciprocity, and I think Envy beat them as well.
Yeah.
That's correct. So like that was when Envy was just looking godlike. So I think a little bit of a slow start, and then you get fed into losers bracket, and they beat EG 3-0, which I think everyone would have expected. And then they get matched up against Gen G. And Gen G was the one team I was saying before the tournament started, I was like, this is the team that could take Optic down. I think they have what it takes. And in that regard, that's what's happened. But of course, Gen G wasn't as good as anyone thought, and Optic got knocked out. But combination of unfortunate they didn't get a practice with Dashy, didn't work hard enough to make up for that fact, and then just had a slow start, and then they just run into tough teams in the loser bracket.
Yeah. Something for me that really kind of struck me off guard, I guess you could say, kind of caught me off guard in regards to statistics. TJ and Scump just looked out of sync. I think that was something that a lot of the analysts were kind of touching on and saying the SMGs compared to the assault rifles just looked totally off, and that kind of relates in regards to having Zuma kind of step in as the SOG, seeing other players kind of step up to that Maddox role. We saw a combined 0.90 combined KD compared to the ARs of the team, which averaged a 1.15, and TJ and Scump are also the 2 lowest KDs in Hardpoint, Search and Destroy, Control, and Respawn. So definitely, I think, a little bit more work for OG to do when it comes down to cross-divisional play, but we'll see kind of how they improve moving forward.
Now, I want to touch on that, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Immediately after the tournament, I'm assuming you saw it as well, is like Karma and TJ were already tweeting about like switching roles or switching specialists, at least, of like TJ going to at least they get the grapple. And I'm assuming that was like a quickly identified issue of like, they're, I think, the only team that has a non-SOG player running the grapple. There's probably one other exception to this.
Yeah.
But if you have your 2 SOGs that are just getting whacked on, and at least in terms of KD, if pacing's a problem, if they can't be in the right spots, like if you're just playing against other SOGs that are more aggressive, getting better positions first, it can be problematic. So by no means am I saying that one fix is going to solve everything for them, but at least Optic Gaming was very aware that there is an issue with it, and already they're trying to do something to fix it.
Yeah, already addressing things, which is good to hear. Now, something more on the positive end, we have Team Envy. I think I don't really know honestly where to put them right now, Chance. I'm a little bit confused when it comes down to the boys in blue. They obviously start off the group stage by 3-0ing E United. They 3-1 Optic, and they later lose to Red 3-0 and fall to Heretics 3-1. I felt like there was a ton of positivity out of the gate for this team. Everyone was saying, okay, now we're starting to see the roles start to kind of make sense. This is the team that we were expecting to possibly see. And then it just starts to fizzle out. What did this event prove to you about the boys in blue as of this moment?
I think it just proves they're inconsistent and they can't be trusted, because like when it comes out and Envy beats Optic Gaming and beats United, and as good as they looked while doing it, we're thinking this might be the team that like can win an event, or they can be
absolutely.
Like, this is what the Envy team was designed to be. And then the tournament ends and it's like, oh, well, they beat United, who got dead last. They beat Optic Gaming, who got top 12. So in retrospect, they didn't beat teams that were doing great at all. And then they just lost a bunch of series. And like there were like 2 different teams of the Envy on day one. Everyone was doing incredibly well. Hugh was having great performances, but everyone was right there with them. And then day number 2 comes and it's dropping 40 kills, and then just everyone else on the team is like double negative. And like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm generally speaking, I'm against roster changes, but I am incredibly close to saying Envy, like, just you got to make a switch. Just drop some players, drop however many you need, do whatever you can. Even if it doesn't seem like it's a great pickup, you might just have to give it a shot because like they're very close to that point where they're just like, there's no hope of a fix. Almost. They're not quite there yet, but almost.
Yeah. I feel like there's almost like at certain points where, like you said, it's like if they were to close out this particular tournament of Fort Worth, the way that they started, it's like, okay, maybe we don't need a roster change, but at the same time, it's just like the collection of all these things, the originality of this team from Evil Geniuses looking upon as not even like a top 8 team coming into champs and then winning it. I think it's kind of been their identity for the longest time, and I'm not sure if they can really kind of escape from it, to be honest. Now, moving on to one of the biggest shocks of the entire tournament, at least for me, and I think it might be for a lot of people out there, Team Reciprocity off of a roster change by adding Dylan for Dens from a 2-5 record in the Pro League to finishing top 3 at CWL Fort Worth. Chance, these guys came out with the fire. They were looking fantastic. From what you saw of Dylan and Reciprocity, talk to me about this team and how they've improved since the recent changeup.
I'm going to say it shouldn't even be that big of a surprise. Like, when the year got kickstarted, it was expected Red Reserve to be the best, Reciprocity to be the second best. But like the Reciprocity guys used to be on Unilag. And towards the end of the year, I think they had like a top 6 finish. And then I think they had like a really unfortunate either top 8 or top 12. But they had glimpses of being like second best term in Europe, really good contenders. I think they had wins against the top teams. Coming into this year, obviously they trade essentially Alex for Dens. And that's when like the question mark comes of like how good is Dens going to be, because we've seen him do great things at Flan Freak in Australia, but never good enough to be consistently top 8, let's say, or just consistently good. And once we figured out that things with Dens weren't working out, when you put Dylan in that team, Dylan, every event he's had this year has been superstar, lights out, arguably top 10, maybe even top 5 in the game at times. I probably wouldn't put him there, but he's in that conversation. Like, that's how talented he is. So as soon as he's on that team, I think the reset should go back to what we thought at the start of the year of, this team is going to be legit, one, if not the best team in Europe, and it's going to be close between those. So once you get to the point in the bracket where it's Red Reserve versus Reciprocity, and one is guaranteed to get top 4, you're feeling great if you're Red. Like that's where both of those teams should have been.
Now, I will say the only reason why it does shock me, I probably put a lot more in this than I should, but their loss to Evil Geniuses to close out the Pro League, for me, was just like, okay, like, this is it. Like, not that I don't have any faith in the team, but I just thought for a second, maybe it's kind of like a Team Envy situation where they are super inconsistent. I do agree with you. I think that Dylan, coming into this team looked fantastic on LAN. I was just curious how it would work together in retrospect, just regarding the roles, regarding how fast the players were playing. But I think, to be honest, I think you can agree with this as well. The addition of Dylan just totally ignited this team to really kind of think, okay, hey, now we can start playing our game. Not that Dens was the overall major difference, but I think it kind of ignited the spark that kind of improved the team overall. But I will say, a little bit surprised, totally get where you're coming from. I just, that EG thing where they lost in the Pro League to the worst team in the Pro League, without question, it made me worried. I'll be honest. It definitely kind of made me a little bit worried. Obviously, when we speak on improvement, I also want to cover the Thieves, right? Hunter T, they placed top 4 at this event. I will say they had some very unfortunate circumstances, ones that we might have never even seen before. Obviously, they barely missed out on the winner's bracket due to a tiebreaker. They also, mid-series, lose one of their best players in Priesta due to sickness and have to sub in Pharaoh, which allowed for a lot of funny moments and Twitter memes, I'm sure, regarding the substitute. What did you make from what you saw of Hunter T? Where would you place Hunter T if we saw them actually make it through winners, or rather make it from pools to winners, and if they would have kept Priested? I mean, do you think that they could possibly be in the grand finals, if not win the entire thing, if everything goes their way?
Yes, they could have been in the grand finals. Yes, they could have won the entire thing. And like, that's it. I think this is going to end up being one of the biggest what ifs we have this year, of just what if Priested didn't get sick? What if he felt fine going into the day? Because it was unfortunate they got in losers because they only dropped one series. But even from there, they were just like not completely running teams over, but I think overall they had like either the best or second best hardpoint record, the best or second best control, and S&D. Like, or not control, actually. Control, they were middle of the road. But for hardpoint, search, and destroy, either the best or the second best team in terms of record. They had to play a ton of maps, and they looked fantastic. It was Octane's best event we've seen from him in, I don't know, probably a year sometime. I'm sure last year he put up some big numbers, but it was Octane at his best. It was Kenny at near his best, putting up the big performances. And then in the Pro League, we had already seen the big performances from the other guys. We already knew that Priestley was a superstar. Slasher is, of course, Slasher. And Enable, even during the Pro League, had some great performances. So that team really seemed to have the makings of it. And then even in the series where Priest is like puking, like he's still dropping like 50 kills. Like he's feeling terrible, putting up 50 kills. They win that series 3-1, and then they have to play with Pharaoh. And then that's like the toughest match they had. Like you have to play with the sub on like 30 minutes notice to play against Reciprocity, who's got a hot hand. And even then they still took a map, which I think is like impressive in its own right. But
yeah,
if they had them, it's obviously not a guarantee they get past Reciprocity and make it to the grand finals. But
there's a good chance. There's a good chance, I think. Yeah.
They could have won the whole thing. I think they could have.
I do. I agree. I'm right there with you. Now, I remember what you said during the Pro League in regards to Splyce on how you thought the way they closed out, at least in reference to their series versus Denial, wasn't exactly accurate of their true capability. Like we both didn't think that necessarily was actually like really wasn't going to be Splyce when it came down to future events. And the reason why I say that is obviously because I thought the exact same thing. And while I'm not the biggest fan of the roster's combo of players, I have to, along with everyone else, respect what they've done in the last two major LAN tournaments, obviously by finishing, the way that they have. What are your thoughts about Splyce, and why do you think they continue to be so consistent, unlike all the other teams around them?
That's a great question. I think part of it in the Pro League is you had players for me that started to kind of like underperform. Like Temp has always been one of the best players in this game at the very least, but like Jerd, you could kind of highlight like Jerd in accuracy, let's say in the Pro League, start to underperform by quite a bit. And that's where like the inklings set in for me of like, you're losing to Denial. You're starting to have problems closing out maps. You don't look as great as you once were. And if individual players aren't as quite as good as they were, I see everyone else catching up rather than you like holding that line. But then you come into this tournament and Jerd starts playing out of his mind. Accuracy starts to pick things up a little bit. So any minor issues that they had, they look a lot better. And more importantly, they started closing out games. Like I think their first series in winners, they had to play Denial again, and it goes to game 5. I think it might have been on Payload S&D as well, which they played in the Pro League. And there was that instant like, this might happen again, Splyce might fall. And if they lose that game 5, then like that team might be completely cooked. But they get that win, then they play against Represent. Then they just start running teams over. And it's like they really flip that switch. So I don't know if you want to call them a tournament team, if it's just individual players picking up the slack a little bit, whatever it is. But yeah, they have to be solidified as one of the best teams in the game. Well, obviously. So.
Yeah. Now, we obviously have to cover Luminosity as they did win the entire tournament. I think it's only fair that we do cover the champions, right? Now, one major change that we saw throughout the event was the fact that LG actually started using the Rampart, which changed up how they were doing in slang. I know there was a lot of talk around Classic, his massive improvements with that particular weapon, and even when it came down to LG's Final Few series, we started to even see other teams start to use the Rampart as well. Regardless of that, what do you make of Luminosity, and do you think they have the ability to continue this kind of pace that they're on right now? I mean, would you be surprised if we started to see Luminosity maybe pick up another championship when it comes down to London or Anaheim, etc.?
At this point, I would be surprised with just about any team that wins. I'd say it's like chaotic enough. Everyone is so competitive enough that any team that gets a win, it's going to be impressive. That being said, in terms of the Rampart, I'm assuming other teams are either going to use it or teams are just going to be like, hey, let's not use FMJ. Whatever it's going to be, I don't think LG can rely on that to have individual players make those big performances like Classic stepping up. But that being said, Rampart aside, we still saw a lot of great things from them. Not only their clutch factor, but every single player stepped up at one point or another. Like Slacked in the grand finals had one of the best events we've seen from him in a long time. And like there's no Rampart in his hands. Like it's running the SOG for the most part at the very least. So if you're going into a grand finals and Gunless is under 1 KD and you win the grand finals, that's a team I can have confidence in, like going down the line.
Now, speaking of Gunless, right, this is his 5th championship. This is his 4th MVP. People could even argue he should have 5 MVPs at this point in regards to the events in past. Regardless, what makes him different from everyone else? I mean, we haven't necessarily, at least I haven't seen a player, even with his team going down, he's still putting up numbers. I think I remember, I forget what event or what series it was throughout this tournament, but I remember there was a moment where all of his teammates, I think it might have been versus UIU, And all his teammates were negative. I think Formal even had like a 0.7, yet he finished off with a 1.5. I forget exactly the series, and obviously I should probably know that since I'm going to reference it. But regardless, though, he continues to play well, even if the rest are struggling. I don't know if we've seen someone quite like Gunless before to come into the scene just a few years ago and to already dominate the way he has, to be constantly in discussion from title to title as the, if not one of the best players in the game. From what you've seen, I mean, what do you think about Gunless up to this point in his career, and where do you rank him among the current top players in the game?
He's probably guaranteed top 3 in the game right now if you don't want to give him first. And I think if you do give him first, that's perfectly fine. He just won an MVP. I don't know. Like, even when I watch him play, I'm not overwhelmed by anything that he does. Like, obviously, I think he's great at everything. But the one thing that stands out is when I watch him play, I never expect him to lose a gunfight. There's never a gunfight he has, even if it's a bad gunfight for him to take, unless he's already like one shot. I just expect him to win. And like, he seems like he kills faster. Like I don't know how to explain it. When I watch Dashy play, I look at like elite level movement. When I watch Shoot play, it's the movement, it's the speed, reaction time. And when I watch Gunless play, it just, everything seems really good. It doesn't seem like it's on that next level. And then he just eviscerates people. He just like, they disappear in front of him. It's insane. Like, he's unique in that regard, I think. He is just one special kind of player. Whatever it is, he grinds more than everybody. He's a freak of nature at the game. I have no idea, but he is in his like own little Call of Duty world. And like anyone, like the biggest takeaway I had from him in Vegas was the reason I put Dashy above Gunless was because of the search and destroy. The respawns were perfectly comparable between the two, but Dashy's S&D was much, much better. Coming to the Pro League, and now Gunless is like the best S&D player we had, like in the entire thing. Like, he completely inverts his gameplay. Whatever he's bad at, he makes his best thing. Everything is about insane.